Here's my,
Recording.
okay. Here's my original CMM assessor's certificate signed by Watts Humphrey. I was actually in the first class of external assessors that were trained and certified at the SEI back in roughly '88. And then there's Watts's book, the original book that started it all off, which, I'm lucky to have an autographed copy by Watts.
Yep.
Yep. And then also the original CMM book, which is also my autographed copy signed by my good buddy Bill Curtis, my partner in crime for the last 40 something years. So I've been doing this stuff for quite a while. Anyway, let me go ahead and see if I can share my slides. Okay. Can people see my slides?
Looks good.
Yes.
Okay, let me put it into presenter mode. Okay, we'll get the ball rolling. All right, everybody good? Everybody sees the first slide?
Yep.
Okie dokie. So what I'm going to talk about today is what is contained in my report, the cost of poor software quality in the United States 2022. This is the third report in a series that I've been doing every 2 years. And hopefully by now, I actually completed this report almost 6 months ago. So, and it got published on the CISC webpage back in early January. So hopefully by now, most of you all have seen it. So I'm basically, in this particular report, I shifted the focus from the costs and just pointing out the issues and the problems to move more into the solution space. And so that's the primary difference in this particular version of the report as opposed to the others. Now, what you'll see is in this presentation and also in the report is it's chock full of data about the cost of quality. And all of those sources of data are found embedded in the report. There are probably 100 and something hyperlinks in there that will take you to the actual information that I've drawn from that you'll see in the report. So highly referenced, easy for you to find, all freely available. You just got to go get it if you really want it. Okay, and so here's the web page where you'll actually find not only this report, but you'll find the first two reports as well. And then also, I think there's a webinar out there that I did back a few months ago that you'll find. Okay, so, and this is my contact information. That's how you can reach me. My UT email address is probably the easiest thing. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I started this work, I started working on software quality issues and software process improvement issues back in the early 80s when I joined MCC and worked with Bill Curtis to start the Empirical Studies of Software Development project. And as a part of that, in the early 80s, the SEI came about sort of mid 80s, and I got involved with that as a part of what I was doing at MCC. And then it just kind of blossomed from there because, I was on the empirical side and the SEI was more on the practical side of trying to help people improve. Anyway, so I'm retired now. I retired in 2017 and I get to do whatever the heck I want to do. As long as I'm not bothering my wife, everything is fine and dandy. And so this work that I've done on the cost of poor quality is something that I do every couple of years, but most of my time I'm doing other stuff. I'm still doing some consulting. Right now I'm working on bringing high-speed internet into the rural areas of Texas where I live, because people are not very well connected here, and it's a big problem. And hopefully my internet will stay up for this entire presentation. Anyway, interestingly enough, it was 25 years ago, almost to the date, when I published my first article on the cost of software quality. It showed up in Crosstalk magazine, where I proposed, a new model for categorizing and classifying the cost of software quality, both good and bad. And that's basically that's where this whole thing started. And the reason that it started initially was because as part of doing the SEI assessment work that I was doing in the mid 80s, I had to go into organizations, and especially the company I was affiliated with after MCC, which was Lockheed. And I had to go into each and every division of Lockheed Martin and do a CMM assessment to try to help them establish a goal to reach CMMI level 3. And of course, nobody really wanted to talk to me, and I had to prove that there was benefit involved in improving your software capabilities. And so it was at that point in time that I started collecting industry data and using that industry data to, in fact, show some of the skeptical CEOs and C-suite executives that I was talking to that this was going to be worth their while, not just to achieve an SEI CMM level number, but to actually have a payoff. And so that's when I got involved with collecting data and publishing this stuff. Okay, so here's my kind of my motto these days. It's apologies to Phil Crosby. We all know that software quality is not free, but we also know it's cheaper than the alternative. Okay, so the reason I started this work was to try to bring to the surface all of those hidden and indirect costs that are actually part of the cost of poor quality that are typically not seen. And so I use this iceberg model to essentially show, what is typically seen and what is typically unseen. And yet we know empirically that the hidden costs of poor software quality are 6 to 50 times more than the observable cost. And so the whole idea was to essentially flip this iceberg model over and expose those hidden costs so that they could be seen and factored in to the equation. So I started this series of reports basically with the purpose to inform and inspire my readers to seek that knowledge within their own organizations. All right. And as a result, I was able to come up with a first order approximation of the magnitude of this huge and under-recognized problem. And so I did the first report in 2018, and it was fairly popular, but not near as popular as the 2020 version. So the 2020 version of the report got a lot more press and views, tens of thousands of downloads, 500 million media mentions. It actually got translated into Japanese and gained a lot more attention. And here are some of the places where it actually popped up, in the press, talking about my report. And a couple of my favorites were this one here, that was published by Embedded Computing Design. Okay, poor software quality costs trillions. Yes, trillions. And even the communications of the ACM finally recognized the work that I was doing and published a summary of the report as well. So got some respectability and some interest, and it got a lot of notice. So far this year, and this is a couple of months old now, we're starting to get similar amount of attention paid to the 2022 report. It's popping up in a number of places. At the end of March was something like 400 downloads from our website and 229 million media mentions that have happened so far. So it's getting attention too. And also this one got translated not only into Japanese, but also into Spanish. And so now for the first time, the entire Spanish speaking part of the world, the South Americans and below the United States, these people are all reading this report for the first time, and it's getting a lot of notice in that regard as well. And so I still get contacts from all over the world about this work and what it means to them internationally. All right, so let me jump right into the numbers and give you basically the numbers behind the report. So for the purpose of context, the GDP in the United States for last year was approximately $23.3 trillion. All right, and the IT labor base for last year, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, was approximately $1.51 trillion. So that gives you some idea of the state of the context in which these numbers that I'm about to show you are meaningful. Okay, there was also at the end of 2022 a shortage of 300,000 IT jobs in the United States alone, and more across the world. And I don't know that that's got any better. All right, so 2022, the total cost of poor software quality in the United States, as estimated by me, was $2.41 trillion. And that was up a bit from the previous 2 years. The technical debt, which is not an observable, which is not a cost, it's a cost yet to come, if you will. I was able to estimate that at $1.52 trillion, and that's principal only. So when you add those two numbers together, you're looking at about $4 trillion in potential cost of poor software quality last year in the United States alone. Okay, these numbers have risen approximately 40% over the 4 years that I've done these reports, and I think you can see that. The biggest chunks, for example, under the cost of poor quality, the major one was the cost of operational failures, approximately $1.81 trillion. Cybersecurity was a big chunk of that over the last year, basically $1.44 trillion all by itself. And so we're going to dig into that in just a little bit. Okay, in the area of legacy systems, we saw about $520 billion in poor quality costs. And here's an interesting side stat. A recent survey that was done of 250 IT professionals stated that the majority of application modernization projects fail at an average cost of $1.5 million and 16 months of wasted time. Okay, that's not a strong statement about our industry. The area of unsuccessful development projects, these are the ones that never see the light of day. And so the success rate there is at pretty much steady at about 30% of all projects. Okay, and then underlying these areas is all the hidden costs that you all as software engineers and quality professionals see, which is the cost of finding and fixing defects across all these areas. And that was estimated to be about $607 billion, not much of a change from 2020. Okay, so there were the numbers in 2020 for comparison. All right, so those are the numbers. If you want to follow the data, the links are all there in the report, and you can see, how it was all estimated. So now I want to turn my attention to some specifics. So let's look at 3 problem areas that popped up in this report. All right, the first one is in the area of cybercrime. And what we saw here was that the cost due to software vulnerabilities went up by about 64% in 2021 and another 42% in 2022. The total cost of cybercrime for this year is expected to be around $8 trillion, and that's worldwide. Okay, so that is one huge problem area that we're going to spend some time digging into. Okay, the other one is open source software. All right, and what's happening here is, you probably realize this, that open source software is eating the IT world. Many people are using lots and lots of open source software included in their systems that they deliver and use. And yet what we're seeing here is that the failures due to these open source software components rose 650% in 2021 alone. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that we need to dig into. The third area that we're going to look at is technical debt, which is now the largest obstacle to changing any existing code base because of the amount of technical debt that's buried in the systems that we're trying to evolve and modify and enhance. Okay, so those are the three problem areas that I focus on in the report. That's where most of the costs are. Okay, and then we'll shift into talking about the solution areas that I see on the horizon. And so you're going to be glad to know that the first one we're going to talk about is software quality standards and models, and what I see happening there that will contribute to helping out handle these large costs that we're seeing. Okay, then secondly, new deficiency exposure and remediation tools. I'll talk about that. And then thirdly, I'll talk about AI and machine learning tools specifically for the task of software quality engineering. So not Chat GPT. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Okay, so let's dig into the first one. So the area of operational failures, $1.81 trillion all by itself. And so we started off the 2-year period with the discovery of the SolarWinds debacle. And I was able to dig out some of the costs of the impact of that SolarWinds hack. SolarWinds themselves lost $5 billion in market cap, and each one of their customers that was using their software lost approximately $12 million on average. So big deal. That one popped up, okay, shortly, in early 2021. All right, and then shortly thereafter, the Log4j security flaw popped up, and this one was huge because it's almost found in almost all Java programs that use it. In fact, there at one point in time, there were 10 million attempts per hour to exploit this flaw in the United States because of how widespread it is. And then, of course, that morphed into Log4Shell, which caused more problems. And then it wasn't too long after that, in 2022, when the Colonial Pipeline attack happened. Okay, and the ransomware basically halted the flow of gas and oil to the entire East Coast for over a week. Okay, so what was happening there was the effect was that they lost access to approximately 100 million gallons of gas and oil per day for over a week, and the grief and that caused. If any of you were out on the East Coast at the time, you'll know just how bad that was. All right, so those are some of the ones that are most obvious that popped up in the news. There's some other ones that popped up, and these are the ones that I described specifically in the report, along with those that I just showed you. So all of these failure scenarios and situations are reported in the report. For the last 2 years, these are some of the ones that have caused the largest failures that have been openly seen and reported in the public domain. The ones at the bottom in red, those are all ones that have happened since I published the report and have happened this year. Okay, and these are all software flaws that have caused operational failures that have led to the loss of millions and millions of dollars. So that's where the huge is. Now, if some of the data that we do have comes from the FBI. So I don't know if you knew it or not, but they keep track of cybercrime losses that are reported to them and through something called their Internet Crime Complaint Center. And this only represents roughly, I don't know how much, but these are only the people who've suffered sufficiently to report these crimes to the FBI. So this doesn't actually, indicate the entire industry, but just those that have reported. And what you can see here is the trend over the last 12 years has been that the number of reports has gone up drastically, except for this last year, where the number of reports actually went down. Okay, but the costs keep going right up. So now we're up to about $10.3 billion in reported cybercrime costs that the FBI knows about. But we know that only 20% of ransomware victims report those incidents to the Department of Justice. So this doesn't near cover everything that's happening. Okay, globally, cyber attacks were up 38% in 2022. And here are the hottest cyber crimes that are going. These are the ones that are having the largest impact, with ransomware right on top, followed by cryptojacking and deep fakes and on and on and on. Okay. And so these trends are obvious. Okay. In the first half of 2022 alone, more than 236 million ransomware attacks were reported across the globe. That's a heck of a lot of ransomware attacks going on, and that's not slowed down from what I can tell this year. Okay, and in conjunction with that, the payments that are being demanded went way up as well. So look what happened in 2021. And this is in millions of dollars. The ransomware payments have gotten much bigger too. So it's a double impact. We also found out that it takes the average organization 277 days to fully identify and contain a data breach, with an average cost up to $4.24 million. That was reported by IBM based on a study and survey that they did. So not only is it costly in terms of dollars, it's pretty darn costly in terms of bringing things back up to speed and getting going again. Okay, the crypto market lost $2 trillion roughly in 2022. All right, and here's basically a summary of what kinds of costs we're talking about. Okay, this is by victim loss type, and this is also reported from the FBI IC3 cybercrime database to give you an idea of where it is and where the money is being spent. As far as ransomware and with the focus on critical infrastructure, we started seeing a lot more attacks on critical infrastructure like the Colonial Pipeline in 2022. And here's where they're coming from. This is the attack vector. So the most often used was this attack vector called Lockbit. Okay, and that is a piece of software that the attack is coming through. And then later on, at the very end of the year, and actually early this year, a new one popped up. Okay, Fortran file transfer tool called Go Anywhere, and the number of incidents where that has been used for critical infrastructure attacks jumped up as well. Okay, interesting, and the government's reaction to that, to seeing this phenomena, is to shift the burden of cybersecurity now to critical infrastructure owners and to software makers. Hello. Okay, so now the people who develop software for the critical infrastructure sector and other sectors are now going to be held accountable, all right, for these attacks. And that's kind of interesting and motivating if you stop and think about it. So for you and for your C-suite friends, did you know that your company's credit rating goes down when your cybersecurity risk goes up? And did you know that your insurance payments also go up as your cybersecurity risk goes up? Oh yeah, I mean, the costs are starting to mount up. And in fact, from the cybersecurity insurance marketplace, we now have some numbers. We can now see that then this is for the cost of a data breach and what insurers are demanding. Okay, but depending upon the number of records that were leaked, you can see what the costs are that are being estimated by the insurance industries, which are going to affect your premiums from here forward, especially if you've had a reported cyber attack. So it goes up pretty quickly, and now we're going to be paying for it with larger insurance premiums. Okay, and these, this model here doesn't even cover things like the loss of IP or loss of market cap or business reputation or the ransom cost itself. This is only a part of it, which is how to contain the breach and regulatory fines and lawsuits. So cybersecurity insurance by itself is not going to cover all this other stuff either. So this is a huge area, and so this is something we need to pay very close attention to moving forward. Okay, let's take a look at something closer to home. So let's take a look at open source software. So I know you all use open source software in your company or in whatever your products that you're dealing with. Here's some interesting facts about open source. Okay, almost all companies use it, whether they know it or not. It turns out that a medium-sized application of a little bit less than 1 million lines of code carries 200 to 300 third-party components. Okay, 80% of the organizations reported an increase in their use of open source. 68 to 75% of organizations that use it acknowledge that they've been impacted by a vulnerability over the past 2 years, but only 46% of organizations are performing security scans to identify those vulnerabilities. All right, sad thing. Okay, the top 10 most prevalent, critical, and high vulnerabilities found in open source software were these, and this is basically comes from a report done by Sync based on their scans of customer software. Okay, another good one comes from Synopsys, and I have to say that Synopsys was a strong supporter of my report and the work that I did, but they have a lot of good data to talk about. So as part of their survey, their Synopsys 2022 OSSRA report, open source software risk analysis, they looked at to see how much of your code base does open source software make up, according to broken down by industries. And so I think you can see here, maybe no surprise, that, for example, in the Internet of Things, a large portion of the software is made up of open source components. Okay, and even over in big data and AI and so forth, a lot of it in retail and e-commerce, a lot of it in telecommunications. So it's a open source makes up a large amount of some code bases. Okay, the survey results that were reported by Synopsys are based on 2,409 audited code bases in 2021 that they did. They found that 97% of their code bases contained open source software. 85% had components that were 4+ years out of date. More than 80% contained at least one vulnerability. 50% were high-risk vulnerabilities. They discovered 508 components per code base on average. And these are results similar to what they saw in their audit of 1,703 code bases in 2022, but that report hasn't been published to the best of my knowledge yet. So this is based on their 2021 scans. Okay, and if you look at the kinds of vulnerable components that are being found in these audited code bases, here's where the top ones are: jQuery, Lodash, Bootstrap, Jackson Databind, Spring Framework. These are all the largest ones that are being found there. Okay, when they looked at their open source software that contained unpatched high severity bugs, all right, they saw this. This is the percentage of code base, again, by industry segment, all right, with unpatched high severity vulnerabilities. And so there's a couple of interesting things here, okay, that you might expect and that you might not expect. So down in these two areas, in the Internet of Things, again, a large percentage of the code base, almost 63%, right, contained high severity vulnerabilities. That doesn't worry me too much. I'm not too worried about my Ring doorbell, having a problem with that. What I am more worried about is up here in the area of aerospace, aviation, automotive, transportation, and logistics, where almost 60% of the open source code bases have unpatched high severity vulnerabilities. Okay, I don't think I'm going to be going out and enabling my Tesla drive by itself capability anytime soon. Okay, here's another one that was found more recently in the JS on Web Token library, and that one is well identified, is now identified and stored in the CVE database. Okay, now I'll shift to technical debt. So I'm assuming you all know what technical debt is. I'm not going to go into that or try to describe it, but I think you know what it is. Okay, and so it turns out that we discovered that total technical debt is between 20 and 40% of the My screen sharing has stopped. Okay. Am I still able to talk to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me see what happened with my PowerPoint slide. Somehow PowerPoint went kablooey on me. Let me see if I can bring it back up and get back in. Oh, okay. We're back up. And let me get to where I was. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Is my screen still sharing if I put the slides back up?
I think so.
All right,
I'm not seeing anything yet.
Okay. All right, let me try it now. Okay. Are the slides back up yet?
No.
No,
You're
no
not?
yet.
Oh, okay. How about now?
There.
They're back.
Yes,
Now you
they
can see
are.
them?
They're back. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. PowerPoint quit right in the middle of that, and I don't know why. Okay. Anyway, so we're talking about technical debt, and basically, all right. Now what's going on? Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. So we also found out that 78% of organizations have accrued more technical debt in the past year than in the previous years, but only 42% of companies feel that they have the ability to assess it. Rather striking. 87% of global CIOs admitted that the complexity of their existing IT systems is preventing them from investing in their next generation of services. So I don't know what they're doing about that. The number of hours that an average developer spends on addressing technical debt is roughly 13.5 out of 41.1, or roughly 1/3 of their time. Okay. Research indicates that 70% of development teams always or frequently skip security steps due to time pressures when completing projects. And the bottom line, I guess, is the technical debt is going to get worse if nothing is done at all. And so maybe it's time to rethink the quick and dirty approach and build refactoring directly into your software development lifecycle. And I think this is kind of a leftover, if you will, from Agile going crazy. Okay, here's another one that popped up. Most of the time, technical debt, you don't see it unless it all of a sudden manifests itself. And this happened actually in December when Southwest Airlines canceled 17,000 flights due to technical debt in its aging crew scheduling system. And what happened was they lost track of where their crews were. The planes were all where they were supposed to be, but they didn't know where their crews were because their system had lost them. And as a result, over 1 million passengers were stranded. They encountered $1.1 billion in direct cost, and they lost $4 billion in market cap that month alone. And as a result, they're going to be spending more than $1.3 billion on upgrades and maintenance this year for those systems. So that's a really good example of what happens when technical debt all of a sudden is seen and turns into real costs. And that's the thing you got to watch out for. So we'll talk a little bit about how that happens. So this figure basically gives you some idea. Think of each one of these boxes here as kind of like a sprint, if you will, which is the typical Agile DevOps continuous integration continuous deployment process, where features are developed and as a side effect, deficiencies get in to the code, and that leads to a fewer number of features being developed in the next sprint and more deficiencies and so on and so forth, until we finally get to the point where quality and productivity has gone way down. And now we've got more urgent deficiencies in the code than we have features. Business risk goes way up, cost goes way up, speed to deliver goes way down, and so on. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Microsoft did a study of what happens when you build refactoring into your development lifecycle. So this study that they did, and again, there's a link to it in the report. All right, they reported these benefits. And so this is the things that you would probably expect. If you actually did address the technical debt that's contained in your systems. Okay. But the interesting one that I'd like to point out is this one on the bottom. Okay, reduce time to market by 5%. There are a lot of people that would make you or would want you to think that wasting time fixing technical debt is going to slow you down. Well, no. Microsoft found that wasn't true, and step size, which in a separate study found out that wasn't true either. Okay, they found out that organizations who actively manage their technical debt will ship at least 50% faster than those that don't. And again, there's a link to that study as well. So it makes good sense, and you deliver better stuff faster, okay, if you manage your technical debt. Okay, so now what we've done is we've gone over the problem areas and where the costs are being seen for this time around. All right, now we're going to shift into talking about the solutions. Okay, so let's see, how am I doing on time? I need to speed up, don't I?
Yeah, you're doing good.
Okay, so let's talk about software quality standards, because I know you guys are interested in this stuff. So, if there was a simple measure for good software, we'd all be using it. Okay. And so we have to look around to see, well, what is a good standard that we can now use. And so luckily in the last couple of years, the ISO 25000 framework has come about and evolved, which precisely defines, the basic 8 software quality characteristics, or what we used to call ILITs. Okay, and 25023 describes how those characteristics can be measured at the software product quality level. So we have ways. We now have not only defined characteristics, but we have measurement techniques, and so that was a good place to start. That's a good place to look at for where we're going to go. Okay. But then we basically needed measurements that were at the source code level, and that's where CISC got involved and helped to create, or did create, the ISO standard 5055, which basically identifies 4 out of the 8 quality characteristics and defines source code level measures for those 4. So at least half of the main quality characteristics are now measurable in the code directly. And the nice thing about this particular framework is it ties directly into the CWE and CVE enumeration taxonomy, which I assume everybody knows about. But if you don't, you need to go look at this in the MITRE, on the MITRE website. But there are over 800 known software weaknesses that are well defined in the CWE taxonomy. And as new ones come about, those are being entered into that database. So we have a pretty good feeling, we know what the weaknesses are, and those tie to code patterns, and those are recognizable, and those are measurable. And that is basically what ISO 5055 is doing for you. Okay. And so now these 4 code level measures are now being automated in some of the new quality analysis tools. So look for that. Look for those that say that they will implement the ISO 5055 standard, and that gives you a huge tool for measuring quality at the code level. Okay. All right. So for those of you who don't know what the CWE is, basically it's a way to define, the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that are commonly found in software. And I hope that you have seen the top 25 list. Okay, so this is kind of like, the OWASP top 10, but this is much better. So this describes the top 25 and gives them a score, rates them as to how much of an impact that they would have on your software. And we're also looking at their change relative to last year. All right, whether they've been encountered more frequently or less frequently. And so this is the top 25, and this is the, you should, if you had to focus your attention on something, this would be a good thing to focus your attention on. Now, having all this definitional framework is wonderful, but if we don't use it, then what good does it do? So unfortunately, a separate study found out this, that only 29% of 1,200 developers that were surveyed believe that the active practice of writing code free of vulnerabilities should be prioritized. And so my question is why? Why do they believe that? Okay, so we're going to get back to that one here in just a second. All right, so I've been involved in the empirical studies of software design and development for 50 years. And so, what I like to do is focus my attention on where the action really is, which is what software engineers and quality engineers do on a daily basis, which is understand, find, and fix bugs. Okay, that's where the underlying cost really is. And so what we've seen is that a significant percentage, 50% or more of a software project's cost today is not spent in the creative activity of construction, but rather in the corrective activity of debugging and fixing errors. So that's where the most of the effort is actually going on in your projects. So it's a good idea for us to actually take a look at the process that is in fact used to understand, find, and fix those bugs. And I've laid it out here in this little model so that you can see basically what happens, what software engineers are actually doing as they do this. And then I've also put the dollar signs up there to demonstrate to you where the concentration of effort and cost is actually going on in understanding a bug and replicating it and creating a test case and determining the root cause of that. And then, of course, the other large cost is in repeating this process over and over again because you didn't do it right the first time around. So this is the actual process. And so that should help you, give you some idea along with, where to look if you're going to be examining code yourself. And so we know that, for example, JavaScript is more prone to bugs. So these are some suggestions about where to look. And so now we can talk about how to look. And so one of the things that we're seeing in industry is the emergence of bug bounty hunter programs getting very popular. Okay, and so it's now worth it for people to go hunt for bugs and get paid. So, for example, in 2021, a security researcher was awarded $107,500 for identifying security issues in the Google Home smart speakers, okay, that could be exploited to install backdoors and turn them into wiretapping devices. So he got a lot of money for that. Hack the Pentagon is a government-sponsored effort that has expanded its work, okay? And now, ChatGPT is all the rage these days, but if you would like to help debug it, you can do that on BugCrowd and win $20,000 a pop for every bug that you find in ChatGPT. And you should probably do that because it needs fixing. Okay, there's also a new set of emerging code analysis tools like you'll see from CAST, automated program repair tools, and now the emergence of context-sensitive debuggers, the most popular of which are called time travel debuggers, where you can go forwards and backwards in time and look at the effect. And so one of the sponsors of my work was Undo, and they did a study of software engineers using their time travel debugging tool and how much time it was actually saving them. And so that's what this chart down here is. Now, it's a fairly small study because they only were able to get 43 software engineers to answer, but I mean, a good percentage, it's almost 3/4 are saving significant amount of time using their time traveling debugger. Okay, so that's a good place to look. All right, now let's turn our attention to AI machine learning tools, which are now here and which we can start using. And so let's start with the question of how do software developers spend their time with code in the first place? And as this study clearly shows, they spend most of their time understanding the code. 70% of their time when they're working with code is spent in understanding it, the existing code. And the example tools that are emerging to help are things like this. Okay, GitHub Copilot is probably the most popular one, which is out there and easily accessible. Microsoft Bug Lab, Amazon's Code Whisperer, Getafix, Kite. VS IntelliCode. There's a number of them that are emerging now that are in fact, AI-based tools that will help assist you with the basic tasks of understanding the code and figuring out what to do about it. Okay. Here's a study that was done by Micro Focus where they used AI in test automation. So they found a 70% reduction in maintenance costs using AI-based AI test automation, a 3x increase in test development speed, and a 30% increase in automated test coverage. Okay, all of this was realized with using AI in the test automation area. Now, what I see is currently missing are the AI-based deficiency prevention tools that can train on known patterns, like, for example, the common weakness enumeration taxonomy, to catch those in real time as code is being written. So, while programmers are typing in the code, catch it then, right then, with an AI-based tool sitting behind you, recognizing a pattern that you are about to inject into the code base. And that's where I think we're going fairly soon. Okay. So, all right, let me summarize then. I'm going to summarize by talking about my entire set of reports and what the basic recommendations to organizations like the ones you are a part of are. And the whole thing starts at the C-suite level. Okay. And so our first set of recommendations has always been, from the very first report, is you got to get the C-suite involved. They have to want to establish quality as a first-class citizen. And one of the ways we're going to make that happen is through the embracing of DevQualOps, which is a model I'll show you here in just a second. They need to learn to ask better questions, which is kind of what I always did as a consultant to teach them at. And they need to learn how to measure software quality and the cost of poor quality in their organization. So that's recommendation number one. To the organizations that they are heads of, we have always recommended that they proactively address flaws and vulnerabilities that lead to failures and reduce the burden of their existing technical debt. At the team and project level, we recommend that teams strive for high performance, use best practices and tools, define and track quality objectives and measure against them, and avoid arbitrary and unrealistic schedules or constraints. And even all the way down to the individual level, we have always recommended, all right, learn and grow a disciplined approach. Okay, don't be afraid of quality and cost of quality metrics. Use existing knowledge sources of bug patterns and structural quality flaws, and we're finding those in the new AI tools. So this is the broad set of recommendations that are in my report, have been in my entire series of reports since the very beginning, and all of that has crystallized into what we call the DevQualOps model. Now, this probably looks a lot to you like the normal DevOps model. So you might ask yourself, well, where does quality come in? Well, quality comes in when you introduce continuous quality engineering into this model, and you build in quality engineering gates and do not pass points into this life cycle, so things do not progress down the pipeline when they shouldn't. And the good thing is, the nice thing is that now the practices and tools that support this model are now starting to emerge. Okay, so this is an easy one to think about. It's not the same as just DevOps, okay? But you must have continuous quality engineering integrated into the process. Okay, so that brings me to the subject of tools. I said that there are now tools that support this model. So let's talk about that. So if you look out at the things that are claimed to be helpful software engineering and quality tools that are out there in the industry, what we find is that there are more tools out there than you can shake a stick at. Okay, so there are tools. There are loads and loads of tools, and people cobble these things together to make up their development environments and their tool sets. And so the question is, are these the tools that I'm talking about when I talk about the new tools that are emerging to support the DevQualOps model? And the answer is no. These are not the tools that I'm talking about. These are the ones that you're using now, probably. The ones that you're going to start using to do the DevQualOps model are these. I've already mentioned a couple of them. Okay, so these are the ones that are starting to emerge and really become, the next generation of software development environments that implement the dev qual ops model that will help you continuously monitor and measure and control software quality at the code level. Okay, we also want to emphasize, that organizations need to continue to use best software quality engineering practices. And so here's an interesting snapshot of the state of the industry that was done by Micro Focus. So they checked to see what specific software quality engineering practices were being used by those companies which identified themselves as quality leaders, as quality mainstreamers, and as quality laggards. And here's what the numbers show. Okay, so basically most of the things that you're familiar with in terms of practices that what are typically thought to be best practices for achieving quality show up here. Okay, but I want to point to a couple of very key ones in this chart that I need you to look at. So one of them is right here. Okay, the adoption of specific quality standards such as the ISO models that we were talking about before. And what we notice here is that the leaders and the mainstreamers are doing pretty well in terms of using these practices, but the laggards are way far behind. Okay, now the rest of them, the rest of the practices look kind of okay, what you might think, but then all of a sudden, let's look at this one down here. Okay, the role in which senior management has played a positive role at instilling a quality culture in our enterprise. And yet that, if there's anybody that my report is for, it's for your C-suite people. Okay, and so we notice that the leaders are doing okay, but look at where the mainstreamers and the laggards are in comparison. So most organizations are not getting the kind of support and participation from the C-suite that they need to. And one of the main reasons is at least I claim, is that there are things that are easily measurable in the world, and cost is one of them because it shows up in dollars. Okay, and time is another one because it shows up in calendar days and months and so forth. But quality has always been the mysterious third part of that triangle that has not actually been measured and used in the trade-off analysis that allows you to achieve all three at the same time. And so it isn't until we put a cost to it, all right, and show it to our CEO that we begin to realize that they are taking on a lot more risk than they realize that they are taking on, or they should be taking on. And so the whole idea of getting everybody to adopt the dev qual ops model is a way to get them on board. Okay, so that's the lesson learned from the survey of software quality best practices that we now see in industry and what people are doing. I'm going to skip over this chart, but it'll be in the published set of charts, so you can look at some of my specific recommendations for developers and so forth. The last one of which is perhaps getting certified, as an ISO 5055 developer. Okay, I'm also going to skip over this emerging technology, which is basically where AI comes in and mines the existing patterns and teaches themselves to recognize and diagnose code level patterns and violations. And this is the next round of technology that I expect to see. All right, now I'm going to go way out on a limb and make some projections for this year and for next year. You can challenge me on this if you wish. I don't mind. Okay, so these are just predictions, and you know how predictions are. So I think that the cost of poor software quality will continue to eat into our real productivity. It's already more than 10% of GDP, and it's going to continue to rise if nothing else is done. Technical debt will continue to limit overall software productivity, and now you have the numbers. I think that shows that. The acute IT labor shortage will continue to exacerbate the above. It looks like there's something on the order of 3.4 million unfilled cyber security positions, globally at this point. The problem areas that I'm showing you of cybercrime and operating open source software and technical debt will continue to grow. Okay, and that will not only move, into the systems that we've got, but look for it to emerge into space. Okay, continued problems we will see with critical infrastructure systems. Okay, and I'll skip talking about ethos. I'll give you a link to that. But healthcare systems are having problems. What I call unsocial media, and that technology is under attack and being misused. Software supply chains and global cyber war attacks, which I expect to see escalate because we now have not only the Russians attacking us, but we have the Chinese attacking us cyberly, and so is the Iranians, and so that's going to continue. Not to mention the cartels and other criminal organizations that are probably going to do great bit of damage over the next couple of years. Okay, unfortunately, that's not a desirable set of predictions, but it's kind of what I see happening. But there is something we can do about it, and I think that if organizations would, in fact, follow some of the recommendations that I put into these reports, that maybe they can get control of the problems of their cost of software quality and their technical debt. Okay, so my wish list for the coming year and a half is that DevQualOps will soon overtake the use of DevOps and CI/CD methods. That smart tools that are now being used inside of organizations will find their way into the public marketplace. Okay, software quality engineering standards will evolve to address the remaining 4 sub-factors of software quality. Cisco only attacked, the 4. There's 4 more to go. Okay, and that the MITRE's CWEs and CVEs, which is the best taxonomy that we have available to us, will start to become widely recognized and used in all IT development projects. All right, and it's also my wish that generative AI, ChatGPT, for example, will not be widely misused for code generation because it's going to produce crappy code that's going to make things worse. So even though we now know that ChatGPT-4 now ranks in the 90th percentile when taking the uniform bar exam, okay, what will happen when GPT-X attempts to replace programmers? Well, it won't be pretty. Okay, and yet there are a lot of people that are trying to do that right now, and what's happening is they're producing low quality code very quickly, and that's just gonna jack the technical debt way up. So those are kind of my predictions. I could be wrong. They're just predictions. All right, so this is the last slide. And now it's your turn to ask me questions.
There's a couple of questions on the chat.
Okay, let's go look at the chat. Okay, so from Chris, I got a couple of them here from Chris. Can you give a quick 1 or 2 sentence that says what these costs are?
Yeah, I could.
I thought I did that.
Yeah, you did that as you went along.
Yeah. Okay, so that one's been answered.
You can ship that. I think.
How does the cost of poor software quality compare to the cost of poor quality in other industries? Oh, that's a good question. Well, I guess the only thing I don't know. I have never measured the cost of poor quality in the housing market or food packaging or anything, so I don't really know the answer to that. It's outside of my domain of expertise. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just trying to emphasize that there's certain things in our economy that we just accept as like baseline numbers. Like
Yes.
like we'll have 3% unemployment, and that's fine. And are we as a society you said we had whatever it was, 10% bad quality software, say, and maybe that's just fine for, you know what I mean? Not that we
it might
think
be
it's
just
fine.
fine if it might be just fine if everybody generally recognized that was the case, but unfortunately nobody does. So I believe what I'm telling you is this is a new fact to consider.
And that kind of leads into my last question, which once again, not that it's more of a these are more of discussion points than a question to you particularly.
Okay.
Because I get it that it's not your research.
No, but the last question on how much of this problem is because of short-term emphasis on stock
Yeah.
prices and the push to release to make quarterly numbers. I would say that probably has a good deal to do with it. But again, it's you know, it's because it may well be because of the fact that software quality is not a first-class citizen in the C-suite. Okay, and it's because CEOs do not understand the amount of risk that they're taking on, unless something, you know, unless that, you know, so they get hacked, and it costs them $5 billion in market cap, and it costs them their bonus, and like the CEO of Southwest Airlines, you get fired. And that's when they pay attention.
Has that changed over time?
I think so. I think so.
As a country compared to other countries, are we doing better or worse?
That's also a good question. I don't know. I don't know based on the data the answer to that, but you know, we are the biggest of the bunch because our IT industry overwhelms everybody else. So you know, what we're seeing here, you know, is the big stick. Okay, it's the big piece of it. You know, I can compare it to international averages. Is about the best I can do, but as far as other countries, particularly, I can't really answer that question.
So part of this, part of this code of the talk has been on code analysis. What about on the very front end of the process, design and requirements there, pulling those before you get into the coding phase?
Oh yeah, well I mean we have you know, traditional human intense methods for dealing with some of those things, but as we all know, you know, requirements themselves are difficult to measure, difficult to analyze, but maybe we're going to break through there too as well.